Well, good morning, everyone. We'll get started. My name is Bree Jensen, and I'm the Outreach and Partnerships Officer here at Pepperdine Graduate School of Education and Psychology. We want to thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. We're so happy to be presenting the presentation for you all today. We're focusing on advocating for social change, which I know is a huge topic right now. How do we move the needle in our social issues that we care so deeply about that are happening in the world? So thank you again. I have the incredible team on from our MA in Social Entrepreneurship and Change program that's hosting this presentation today. That program, I'm actually a second-year student in, so not only do I believe in it, but it's really been transformative in my own life. So I'd love to share more of my own personal story in that program as well. But first, I'd like to introduce the program chair, Dr. Stephen Kernan, to share a little bit more about the program and welcome you all in today. Dr. Kernan?
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for sharing your Saturday morning with us. Look forward to an engaging discussions. And again, you'll hear a little bit more from me toward the end of it about our program, but we are the Social Entrepreneurship and Change program at Pepperdine, and we're a master's program, and we have campuses in DC as well as in West LA. But we'll tell you more about that because it'll be put into context when you hear these wonderful speakers and just how you go about advocating for social change. So thank you for being with us today and look forward to speaking with you a little later. And Bree?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kernan. Yes, you'll definitely hear more from Dr. Kernan throughout the day, as well as stories from our alumni from the program, people that sit on our board will be hosting. But before we get started, we'd like to do an interactive activity with all of you just to see who's in the room and get to know you a little bit better. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to rename yourself. You can use the three little dots in the upper corner of your screen and name yourself maybe from the organization that you're coming from, as well as your name. So we'd love to get to know you. So the first activity we're going to do is from menti.com. So you can do this on your computer or on one of your devices, your iPad or your phone, and you're going to go to menti.com. And once you get there, you're going to put in the code that I'll show you in just a second. So once again, menti.com. And at the top of the screen that I'm sharing right now, there's a code. And maybe someone can put the code in the chat as well. I'm not seeing it because I've got my bar at the top, but you'll put in that code. And the question that we're asking this morning is, what are two of your social issue focus areas? So maybe you focus on making a difference in mental health access. That's my issue, so that's why I say that first. Maybe you're a youth advocate. Maybe you focus on food insecurity, or you focus on women's rights. Please share maybe two of your top focus areas. Great. Great. I see them popping up here. Women's rights, healthcare, food insecurity, immigrant rights, educational equality. Fantastic. Mental health. Great. Education, homelessness. Fantastic. So if you're not familiar with the word cloud, when people say the same word multiple times, it will get bigger and come to the center. So you can see several of you are interested in making a difference in education. That's fantastic. Minority education as well. Educational equality. So we're seeing education come up a lot. We have several of our speakers that's their social issue, including one of our hosts, Dr. Kalatis, is also an advocate for education. So this is going to be a good day for all of us today. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to screenshot it and share it in our reply email so you all can see who's in the room. This is a fantastic opportunity also to network within the chat with fellow advocates and people that are in social entrepreneurship and change. So thank you so much for joining this morning. And we are going to go right into our first conversation, our fireside chat. I'd like to introduce to you, and we'll get this slide up in just a second. Our first conversation is going to be hosted by our very own Beauche. Beauche has been an advisor for the Social Entrepreneurship and Change program. He also has been a part of the program for 11 years as our capstone professor, which is basically our coach while we're incubating ideas and hoping to launch businesses. He has been an entrepreneur in the United States and elsewhere for more than 40 years. He has delivered keynote speeches or conducted master classes in 43 states and 21 countries, and has long been recognized as one of the founders of the social entrepreneurship and social enterprise movement worldwide. We're so honored to have Jer hosting this incredible session. And our guest is Isaac Mccoy. Isaac Mccoy, first name William Isaac Mccoy, goes by Isaac, is an educator, entrepreneur, professional mentor, and a business development executive skilled at navigating the busy intersection of nonprofits, public entities, corporations, and social impact investments. A former White House appointee in the Obama administration, leading economic policies and initiatives to support the growth and sustainability of minority-owned businesses. Isaac is the co-founder of the Jammy Group, a social impact and business development firm, and the I2J Group, a private equity firm that defines success by measuring profit and purpose. So incredible. Dedicated to educating the next generation of business leaders and influencers, Isaac serves as the Dean of the School of Business, Entrepreneurship, and CIS at Stillman College. Isaac and Jer, we're so honored that you would spend your morning with us. We look forward to this conversation. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Bree. I really appreciate you people pulling this together for us and giving me a chance to reconnect with Isaac. We've known each other for a number of years right now, and I'm going to just jump right into this because he has a lot to say. And I think it's important for all of us to hear it, not just people out there who are coming to us to visit us for the first time, but myself and others as well. So this is just the general thing that Bree was talking about. We're here to talk about how you make a change in your social issue that's sustainable and systemic. So Isaac, as a beginning, you spent your life advocating for sustainable systemic changes in social issues through your roles in government, business, education, and nonprofits. I mean, executive positions in all those areas. Why did you decide to diversify so broadly? And why do you think it's important for all four of those sectors to be involved in any given social issues?
Well, first, good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to talk about advocacy and social change. And Jer, like I said, is a good friend, long-term mentor and friend. And once again, this is a great opportunity that Pepperdine has put together. And so to go back, I think I'm getting old now because now I can say going back to why I diversified, or the interest in the different sectors of our country, from public to private to social conscious organizations. One of the things that got me interested in my undergrad years, I was in science. I was pursuing a medical degree. But one of the things I was looking at with the medical degree was really to be impactful to change the quality of life of individuals across the globe. And as I matriculated through our program academically and had internships at hospitals locally in the town, I started to realize that healthcare wasn't just the only way that you can increase an individual's quality of life. There was the social determinants of health. There were other things that impacted it: public safety, education, economic development. These things mattered. And so when I realized if to get to my goal of optimizing and increasing quality of life, I had to be broad. I had to understand these other aspects and perspectives in our world. And so that started to get the wheels turning. So I said, if economics or education, public safety impacts individuals' quality of life, then how do entities and institutions do the same thing? And so I took an interest in the private sector in the way that they operate and they engage the government through policies and then our social conscious sector. And so that's what got me thinking about it is, like I said, the social determinants of health. I said, if I want to be increase individuals' quality of life, I need to understand these issues, and then also the entities and the that then support these things as well, or engage them or factor in them. And then to your second point, why are they important? And one of the things that I mentioned before is, once again, when we look at the quality of life, these are entities that have a perspective. They have different resources. They have different talents, influences on all the social determinants of health. And so to work with them at the intersection, not in their silos. So for instance, the public sector, they set the tone, they regulate, they set policies, they set the groundwork, they set the soil in which things are built out of. And so understanding how policy impacts your social change, not only in the immediate, but over a period of time. Government or public entities are extremely key in this. Then we have the private sector. Those that, it drives our economy. Those also, and then, that drives economy through taxes, through working. And so how do you understand how the private sector has a role in impact and influence and their ability to be nimble, a little more nimble than our government, to impact our social determinants of health, and then our social conscious sector, which also is, they stand in the gap. They advocate for individuals and communities, and marginalized individuals and communities. And so what is their role? What are resources that they bring to the table? What are the limitations that they have? And so when you actually put all these sectors together, even with our academic or institutions, you see that their strengths can support each other's weaknesses. And so at the intersection, we create sustainable change within our movements. And so it is at that point in which I'm happy to be at now, after all these years of working in different spaces, but being able to see how we can move through the intersection of those entities.
As you've been moving through them, Isaac, I'm curious about what's been your greatest challenge in advocating for social change, and what strategies have worked for you guys along the way? And even more importantly, I think, what strategies haven't worked, and what lessons can those failures teach us?
Oh, I think that's a great question. And I've had many failures, but it is always, Nelson Mandela has a beautiful quote that says, "I never lose, I either win or I learn." And so I've had a lot of learning in this advocacy walk. But one of the things I would say was probably one of the greatest challenges is being authentic and not diluting your mission when I try to expand, either financially and or human capital. As one person who is not independently wealthy, didn't come from a family that was independently wealthy, I had to seek, how do you fund these initiatives? And when you do that, very early on, individuals who put money into something, they have a perspective. Right. And so then, early on, I didn't understand that. And so now I'm taking, funds or resources from someone or an entity, and they are now changing the goalposts or the objectives in which we were moving toward. And so that was one of the hardest challenges, is how to say no to individuals who are looking to help, but may not be directly aligned, or that may move us off our goalposts. And so I think that was one of the greatest challenges, is understanding, who we can use to help build capacity, both on the human side, human capital side, as well as financial.
And knowing who to say no to.
Yeah.
Because it'll shift you from the mission and you'll drift.
Exactly. And I think, and especially early on, I think that was, once again, coming out of college and even in college when doing this, when you're seeking these resources, anyone who is saying they're excited about your particular topic, you get excited about. And so you bring them into the tent. And like I said, and sometimes, we were diluting what we were doing and not being authentic to what we were doing. And so that was something that I had to learn. Once again, is how do you find individuals that are not only like-minded, but once again can help, collectively help get us to our goals.
Have you run into challenges in working at the intersection between any 2, 3, or 4 of these things, trying to do something at the same time, or getting in each other's way, or?
Oh, great question. So, and one of the things I think is one of the challenges when working at the intersection of different entities is the fact that everyone not only has their own agenda, but they all have different timelines. And so I always equate our government or public entity like a big cruise ship. It takes a long time to turn. But then when we're dealing in the private sector, they're nimble. They like to see actions within a quarter, where a government says a quarter, they can only hold a meeting in a quarter. And so when you're dealing with these intersections, and then our social conscious organizations, our nonprofits, our religious organizations, when they're a part of these conversations, theirs are cyclical based on the funding that they have. And so the challenges are, how do you then keep individuals' attention when timelines and or resources aren't aligned? And so that is a extremely hard thing to do. Once again, if a nonprofit loses funding in a year, are they still at the table? Do they still have the same capacity? The government, once again, if they say it takes 3 to 5 years, then private sector companies or more nimble companies are saying that's too slow. So once again, how do you navigate different interests and different timelines with different resources?
Have you seen any change in the willingness of the 4 various sectors to actually work with those in the other sectors? Does it happen more than it used to happen?
I've learned now, and I guess I'm now getting older, to say I would like to say that the entities are working better together. I think the first part, honestly, I think we say the right words. We use the word collective impact now. We use the word ecosystem. So we use the language, but in practice, it's more people, because if individuals leave the government, or CEO or director of DEI, if they usually leave a company, then, like I said, their missions change, or things are differently aligned. And so I've seen it better following people than entities, unfortunately. The entities know how to market or present themselves in a way, but it's really the people who drive these. And so I see people with an intent and will that's a lot different than years ago. But once again, entities are still, I think, the same that they were. Once again, saying the right things, but once again, you have to have the right people to really get it done.
I've heard you speak about Nelson Mandela in the past and other aspects of your life, and I'm interested in what other leaders have inspired you. I mean, and why have they inspired you? What is it about them, really, that allowed them, or is allowing them, to move the needle toward positive social change? What's the secret sauce, if there is any?
Oh, I love it. Great question. So first, I'll take the second part, and I'll talk about the qualities I believe in leadership. And there's 5 that I talk about, or that I'd like to look at in measuring, and that's leadership. It's vision, passion, decision making, team building, and integrity. And so when we look at individuals, not only that I'll mention today, and like as you mentioned, Nelson Mandela, but also, like I said, when I look at those qualities, these are the individuals who are able to effectively engage, inspire. They have a strong sense of purpose, and they're effective communicators. And once again, they do this with those 5 qualities. And so some of the individuals that I respect and take some things from are Muhammad Ali is one, and one because of his sacrifice for his beliefs. And as he talked about he had a vision for what he wanted to do in a particular time period. He was passionate about it, and that's why it was easy for him to sacrifice his professional career to advocate for what he thought was just. W.E. Du Bois, with his ability to communicate, his scholarly work that inspired generations, not only just through academics, but through policy. And civil activists, like his work was amazing. Once again, when you look at his vision, his passion, his ability to make decisions on where he articulated for the Black community. Ida B. Wells, her courageousness and tenacity in shaping the story around what was happening in her time. Like I said, it was extremely dangerous, but once again, she had this integrity, she had the passion, she had a vision in telling a story that was different. Martin Luther King, we all, talk about and celebrate. But one of the things I love was his ability to be nimble in communication and to be able to reach everyone at every level. And once again, it goes back to his vision, his passion, his ability to have integrity in the things that he stood for. And as a Christian man, Jesus was another one that is someone who I, not only my parents who are ministers, who trained us, but he was a loving agitator who was able to meet people where they're at. And so these individuals I take bits and pieces from their work. And I would be remiss not to mention my parents, and maybe they don't have the Wikipedia pages as the individuals I just mentioned, but I wouldn't be here, with you today if they didn't exemplify vision, passion, their ability to make tough decisions, and definitely their integrity. And so these are the things that, really modeling things that my mom has done. And like I said, she may not have a large following or Wikipedia page, but these are the things that I've seen in leaders that move change within institutions, within communities, within our nation. Those are some of the things or qualities or secret sauce that I would say.
And if you will, who today is following in their footsteps in addition to you, people that you admire that are doing things to help generate positive social change today around particular issues or across the board? Now, there are 3 or 4 people that come to mind as I lay that question on you.
Ooh, good one. Today, so one I'll mention. He is Dr. Byron Brazier. Byron T. Brazier is the pastor of the Apostolic Church of God in Chicago, and not just from a religious standpoint, but the work that he's doing around community engagement. He is leading efforts that look at the social determinants of health, and he is playing at this intersection of social conscious, religious organizations, government, and private. So they have social enterprises, they're connected to government entities, both local, but then also bringing in community. And so he advocates and stands in the gap for marginalized individuals. And once again, it does it at a very unique way. And then too, it's not one in which he's pressing the issue in the sense of time. It is everything is in its due time. And so I love his patience, but his fervor to move things forward. And so that is one that comes first to mind, once again, as we talk about social change and the intersections of our entities. Now you get, who are some others? That's a good one. Well, obviously, I worked in the Obama administration, so I have to say Michelle and Barack Obama. Those are individuals that obviously inspired me for the last 15, 16 years, and living in Illinois. That's something, someone that you've seen for a number of years do great work, or that both of them do great work in that. And so I guess I'll put those 2 in there and say those are my 3 right now off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's just interesting who become our heroes and our leaders. I worked for a nonprofit organization back in the 1970s, run by a man who did that for 40 or 50 years. And he built a massive set of programs for people who were physically challenged, although we didn't even use that phrase in those days. A very determined, soft-spoken, straightforward, loving man who focused on that issue and built a community around him to do that. And then I was a chief aide to the founder of Control Data Corporation, William C. Norris, who really was the first in the private sector to articulate the precepts of social enterprise. He didn't call it that, but he said we need, as corporations, to begin addressing the unmet major social needs in this country, and we need to do it on both a profitable and a promise basis, so that people are lifted up. All of us are lifted up. And it all started with the riots in the late 60s and the burning on the north side of Minneapolis. And he, instead of running from it, sent his executives and his employees in to that arena and started working with that community. Much more to that story, but we don't have time for that. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. And, Isaac, it often seems to take forever, as you said, to create a positive social change. And so many people become weary and discouraged along the pathway. How can we help them? What wells can we draw from to rejuvenate them, keep them motivated, regardless of whether they're students or already working in government or in business or in nonprofits or education? What's the single most important advice you can offer them that will keep them going and bring them with you, or have them follow you? You may not bring them, but they'll follow you.
Oh, that's a amazing question, and I wish this was I heard this conversation about 20 years ago to see how do you continue not to burn out. But I think over the years and experience, one of the things that I think is extremely helpful is know thyself, know yourself. One, understand your limitations, right? So we care about a particular issue, but that is not just us. We have relationships, be it romantic, professional, and or family relationships that also need our time and our attention. And so how do you now understand yourself in this space? So I think that is key, because then you understand when you need to recharge, when you need to step back, when you need to invest in yourself to continue this work, because it is a life's work. And so knowing yourself and knowing what other things are pulling on you and how your cup gets full, I think is first and foremost, because, once again, if we, if we're not physically, mentally, and socially at our best, and then we're not giving our best to our cause, we're not standing in the gap the best we can. And then also, I would say, how do you build a team? In a support structure that is not only challenging you to continue to do great works and stand in the gap, but how do individuals bring you additional information and perspective, but then also some encouragement, and they pour into you. If we those who have either marched or did sit-ins, if you were doing it by yourself, you would only last so long. But when the more people come in, you get reinvigorated, you get some energy. And so when we do things, we find individuals that are like-minded. That gives us an extra, a little extra oomph. And so try to find paths, and once again, and don't, traverse these alone. Sometimes these things are lonely paths, but make sure that you're building a solid team that can invest in you, that pours into you, once again, because it will get, it is long, it does get dreary, but you're doing some great work. And so people around you and knowing yourself, I think, are two major things that I would say to help.
Authenticity, absolutely. That's really what is the beginning point, because you cannot be somebody that you are not, and you cannot fool people that you are something that you are not. Isaac Mccoy, one of our leaders, one of the people that is going to be turned to more and more often by people in all these sectors, by me, by others like me. It's been a privilege, Isaac. Thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate your time. Good seeing you, Jer.
You bet.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. Can we do a virtual, high fives, high tens, applause? That was so great. Thank you so much, Jer and Isaac. I really got a lot out of that. A few takeaways that I pulled out. First of all, Isaac, I love the expression loving agitator. I don't think I've heard that before. And I just think that's such an incredible way to come about advocacy. And also the fact that you were talking about sharing your story differently. There's so much noise out there right now, so much content. So to be able to be authentic and share your story differently, I think is a huge takeaway as well. And I love also the fact that it's so important to find like-minded individuals. And that's really what I found within the SEC program. I know I sound like I'm doing a commercial, but it's really authentic to me. That's my story, is that I did do it alone for a lot of years, pretty unsuccessfully. And now that I have my people, it's been so encouraging to have like-minded individuals that are supporting me. So thank you very much, Jer and Isaac. We so appreciate you. We're giving you another virtual applause. We're going to be transitioning into our next section, which is a panel. But before we do so, you probably saw the exciting announcement on the flyer that we will be giving out one $2,500 scholarship to one person that's attending today if you choose to do the Social Entrepreneurship and Change program. And our program is offered in DC coming up in 2022. So if you'd like to use this scholarship in the next 3 years in DC, you'll be free to do so. And if you would like to be eligible for drawing your name at the end of this presentation to receive that scholarship, we're going to be dropping a Google form right now in the chat. All you need to do is fill it out. And then at the end of this presentation, we're going to be drawing a name out of this list. And one person will be getting that scholarship that you could use in DC or in LA. We have our program in LA as well. This program is hybrid and you'll hear more about it. So you don't have to move. You can just travel into either DC or Los Angeles if you're not local to one of those two areas. And we'll share more at the end. Also, please feel free to rename yourself. You can use the 3 little dots in your upper corner. We'd love to know if you're from an organization or if you have an organization, a business, or if you're from a specific educational institute, you can write that down and then write your name. We would really appreciate that. If you need help with that, please feel free to put it in the chat and we have lots of people to support. So our next session, I'm very, very excited about. I'd like to introduce to you our host, Dr. Anthony Colados. And Dr. Colados is actually my current professor, and we're learning about advocating. And I just got a paper back, so I have some work to do. But I'm glad that he's my professor and teaching me all of his ways. But Dr. Colados teaches within the MA in Teaching and the MA in Social Entrepreneurship and Change program here at Pepperdine. His research interests include sociology of education, critical research, urban education, college access pathways, equitable learning opportunities, health literacy, and school community partnerships, which is so important. Dr. Colados directs multiple projects, including the Urban Parent-Teacher Education Collaborative and Pat Lucas Center for Teaching Preparation and the Teaching and Learning in Age of COVID-19, which we know is so huge for teachers right now, is to learn how to navigate this unknown world. He has a PhD from the University of California, Los Angeles. Thank you, Dr. Colados, for facilitating this session, and I will be introducing our incredible guests as we move forward. Our first guest is Whitney Groves. Whitney, thank you for joining us this morning. We're so happy you're here. Whitney Groves serves as a policy advisor on World Vision's Advocacy and Government Relations team, where she leads the organization's advocacy efforts related to global gender equality and international basic education. She has been with World Vision, serving in several different roles for just over 4 years. She holds a BA from Pepperdine University, she's a wave, and a master's from the University of Minnesota in Child and Adolescent Development. Thank you, Whitney. And then we're going to be moving on to Michael Huang. Michael, thank you so much for spending your morning with us. Michael is the Vice President of Learning and Practice at Community in Schools, where he leads a team to provide training and technical assistance on integrated student support to local affiliates and communities around the country. Prior to joining CIS, Michael provided consulting services to federal agencies, managed leadership development programming at the Council of Excellence in Government and Partnerships for Public Service, and served on the founding team that established the Big City Emergency Managers. He holds a master's degree in public policy with a concentration in budget and public finance from the George Washington University, and a bachelor's from Claremont McKenna. And next, we have Matt Dunbar. Thank you, Matt, for joining us this morning. Matt Dunbar oversees development, communications, and implementation for the organization's strategic vision, focusing on efficient, effective, and sustainable organizational growth and mission-aligned impact. Throughout his tenure, Matt has been a tireless advocate for innovating and long-lasting affordable housing policy and spearheaded the co-founding of Interborough Community Land Trust and expansion of the organization's geographic footprint to include Westchester County. He received his BA from Pepperdine University, his MA from New York University, and is one of more than 7 million adults thriving blind in America. We're so honored to have all of you. Thank you for spending your morning, and we'll get right to it. Dr. Kalatis?
Yes, good morning. I want to thank you, both the panel and everyone, for joining this morning. It is bright and early here in Southern California. I don't think it's an accident that the light is starting to come out right as this conference is beginning. So I think there's something very symbolic there. So let me welcome former, current, prospective students and our partners. I teach, as Bree said, the Mobilizing the Diverse Citizen Sector, or more commonly known as the Advocacy course. I believe it's a dynamic course because it's an opportunity for our candidates to really learn and operationalize some advocacy strategies with much like the amazing panel we have here. So what I'd like to start with is, obviously we just got to see some impressive bios from each of you, but if each one of you could maybe just highlight what you think is your ultimate goal with your position within your organization. And then secondly, kind of how your own personal experience and or educational background influenced your advocacy efforts. So why don't we start with Whitney, and then we'll go to Matt and Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Kalatis, and good to see everyone. Good morning. I think these are both great questions. I think policy and advocacy can be a lot of things, right? It can be research, it's communication, it's relationship building, it's being a subject matter expert while also understanding politics. So there are a lot of ways that you can really focus your time. And I think there's a lot of goals to a policy and advocacy role. But for me, I think the main goal as a policy advisor is really to help the organization. I work with World Vision, so you can see my background, but really help World Vision to identify the most important places and times to speak out on the key issues that I lead on, which are gender equality and education. And then similarly, to help decision makers in Washington understand and be able to act on these issues in ways that are timely and meaningful, and also, they have the support and the information that they need to make those decisions. So I think there's a lot that goes into those aspects, but that's sort of the main goal in my perspective. And then I'll just quickly say, sort of on the personal side, I think I grew up in a family of advocates, and both my parents are lawyers, and I eventually married a lawyer. So advocacy is more of a survival tactic in my life, but it's always been a natural gift and something I've been passionate about. I actually, as a kid, used to do advocacy campaigns around the house whenever I wanted something for my birthday or Christmas. So really, this has been a lifelong journey. And then I think, today I've definitely learned more successful and strategic advocacy initiatives and ways to plan and be strategic. But I think, this has sort of been a theme throughout my life. And then my education at Pepperdine and my master's program really helped to sort of shape some of those skills into something that was meaningful and really sort of pushed me towards a career in advocacy and especially in global affairs, which has always been something I was sort of interested in, but not really sure how to connect to sort of some of these natural gifts. So yeah, I think I'm really grateful for, the mentors and the educators that I had in my undergrad years at Pepperdine, and then also through my master's program.
Perfect, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, and thank you so much for this conversation and for inviting me to be a part of this. My role with Habitat for Humanity in New York City and Westchester County, I've been with the organization for about 12 years and started as a kind of in the community organizing and advocacy side. And now, my role predominantly focuses on trying to align our strategic approach across the organization and align our long-term strategies with our short-term strategies. And when you're working on social change, it's always important to kind of identify what's going to be happening over the next 4 to 5 years, especially trying to adapt kind of a mission and a model like Habitat for Humanity, which most people, when they think of Habitat, they think of the single family home barn raising with a lot of volunteers. And in New York City, our strategic challenge is to try to modify and adapt the mission to serve more people and have more impact in one of the densest, most expensive markets in the country. And so kind of the big challenge for me and for us in this role is to operate and work with government partners, with private partners, with other philanthropic partners to identify the strategies that will allow us to have a larger sector impact as well as to serve more families. And it's one of the reasons why I was drawn to this mission in particular was because it combines both the service impact and directly working with people to have direct impact on people's lives, but also looking at the larger systemic and the structural inequalities that lead to us needing to have that service mission and actually mobilizing people to advocate for change and for policy changes that will both help us to implement our mission and build more homes and preserve more homes, but then also to help make sure that more people have a stable place to live outside of our direct services. So that's our big kind of strategic challenge. And as far as kind of my educational background, I studied religion and politics, the two things you're not supposed to talk about in polite conversation. So I got my BA from Pepperdine in religion and minored in philosophy, and then got my master's in New York that combined religion and politics in an individualized study kind of manner. And both of those areas kind of really help to feed kind of both my motivation for wanting to do these things and provide the skills important to navigate and to kind of really kind of break down what is motivating people, both on the political and the faith side, and then how to clearly articulate, and to kind of argument or debate the issues in order to convince folks that they need to come alongside you to really implement that change. So,
thank you, Matt. Michael.
So first of all, I love the idea of Whitney as a young child sort of signing petitions for a birthday gift or determining and advocating for things that she wants. I think that's genius, right? Like learning skills. And sort of building off what Matthew was saying about Habitat for Humanity. I work in communities and schools, and we sort of play that dual role also of direct service as well as using that experience into our advocacy work. We are in 25 states, the District of Columbia, and we have site coordinators working around the country whose job it is to work with students and families to support them in navigating barriers that keep them from academic success, right? And empowering them to do so, not sort of taking over that role. But then concurrently, advocating and partnering with school districts, school principals to actually remove those barriers, right? It's not just about, well, can I help one person navigate through it, but why is that barrier there and how do we get it out of the way? Whether those are racial injustices, poverty, or public health. So I'm truly blessed and honored to be able to work at communities and schools and play and work with a network of folks who sort of play that dual role. Specifically sort of following suit, talking a little bit about my background and what I bring to this work. I grew up outside of Los Angeles in San Gabriel, California. And when, like many in my situation, when I went to get my driver's license when I was 15, I started to learn that I was undocumented. That was something that my parents and families had not talked to me about or helped me navigate it. And so I won't go into a lot of the detail, but if I could sum up that experience and why it's such a pivotal influence on my work in life now is that, there were so many moments in everyone's lives where, like, for me as an undocumented immigrant, that was an isolating experience. Going to get a driver's license, filling out a college application form, trying to get a job. Every system that I walked to, culturally layered onto it already, was something that like I don't trust anybody and I'm taught not to. And every form is incredibly difficult. And so for me, that isolating experience is likely very true. I just have one flavor of it, right? Navigating systems and structures in poverty, when you're living in poverty, can be an isolating experience, or sort of disconnected youths and homes. And so what I love about communities and schools, and what we really try to sort of think about in our work, is that we're placing a site coordinator in that school to build relationships and make these experiences a little bit less isolating, and really benefit from all of the community resources that are out there, that we as a community, as a society, intend to be accessed, intend to be used, so that we can lift people up and empower them to succeed.
Great, thank you. It's all three powerful examples of folks kind of living out. We talk a lot about kind of an occupation versus a vocation, right? Actually a calling to do something, and it's inspiring to hear each of your roles and kind of the different variables that have come into forming both the people you are and the positive work that you do. I'd like to transition a little. I was laughing a little bit, wondering, Whitney, we don't have to go into this, but I was thinking about, I wonder what some of those campaigns were she was launching as a child. Maybe they were actually a petition against one of the decisions her folks made. So I thought that was funny. I'm curious, Whitney, how do you identify advocates or champions for your social justice issue and advocacy?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Claudius. And I will say some of them were petitions against decisions made in the household, but some were things like, it's time for me to have a cell phone, it's time for me to have a car, you know, things like that. So it really geared more that direction, but yes, it was both and. As far as advocating on the social justice issues that I'm most passionate about, I'll sort of share, you know, about how we've created champions and how we've looked at champion building within the organization, but maybe in the context of an issue I work a lot on, which is ending child marriage globally. And for those who aren't aware, child marriage, about 12 million girls are married under the age of 18 every year. And I'll say that's the first step in identifying champions and doing advocacy, right, is knowing your facts and knowing the research and the data and what's out there. We talk a lot about how COVID-19, the pandemic, is impacting rates of child marriage, impacting gender equality globally. So I think creating champions has, you know, it's research, it's sharing that research, communicating it well. It's identifying decision makers that already have potentially interest or connections to these issues. Maybe they have a daughter themselves, maybe they've traveled to another country where this is highly prevalent, and really connecting those dots is so important in building champions. I think also showing them tangibly how they can make a difference, right? Like, here's A, B, and C that you can do right now to make a difference in, you know, this child's life, and showing them, yeah, how they can take action. And then it's building relationships, and that's the really slow process. I think everyone that works in policy and advocacy knows that it takes a lot of time to really make change, and a lot of that is the relationship building piece of it. It's making those connections over time, and being able to be an influential person to a decision maker. But then thinking a little bit specifically about the team that I work on, we're sort of split into two parts. I work on the government relations side of our advocacy team, which is in DC. We're interfacing with Congress and the administration. And then we have grassroots mobilization, which is a whole nother part of our advocacy, where we have folks around the country that are training our supporters and our donors, and folks that have signed up to be volunteers with us to advocate with their districts and their members of Congress, and their senators in the state. And so they're speaking out additionally into what we're saying in DC is the most important, where we need to weigh in, what World Vision cares about. They're also sort of reiterating the same message around the country. And so this sort of like dual approach is really effective, I think, in building champions. It's not just me, you know, Whitney in DC saying you should care about this issue. It's also your constituents that are writing you and emailing you and calling you about issues that are important. So I think really pairing those sort of two approaches is really successful, has been successful for us in kind of identifying who our champions are on specific issues. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
I was guest lecturing in a grant writing class earlier this week, and one of the questions was about fostering relationships with program officers. And I mentioned how it's not uncommon that you are consistently fostering relationships always, but especially with program officers because there's such high turnover. I'm curious, in your position, is it maybe a combination of both, where you have some partners that have been there for years because of the elected officials, and you have others that are continually transition? Is that something you experience as well?
Absolutely. And this year, that is the theme of the year. I think with the administration change and then a huge change in Congress, we lost a lot of our congressional champions in the past year, which was really unfortunate. But, it's an opportunity also to be able to build new champions. And a lot of times those newer members that are on House Foreign Affairs or Senate Foreign Relations Committee, they're really eager to dive into what they're doing. And so sometimes there's a lot of opportunity to sort of build new champions in new ways.
New energy. Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Thank you, Whitney. Matt, I was going to ask you, how did you choose your social issue and career path? You touched on it a little bit. So maybe there's an interesting intersection here from what Whitney just shared about the ways in which we grow and foster partners, especially in her position around both policy and practice. So maybe if you could expand a little bit on the intersection I was thinking was for yours, the religion and politics, and then transitioning, or maybe not, I don't want to make an assumption, on into your social issue and career path around housing. So if you could expand on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. I actually, when I went to Pepperdine, and I started at Pepperdine in 1989, and I was actually pursuing religion, a degree in religion because I was interested in going into the ministry. And actually, 9/11 happened while I was at Pepperdine. I was a chaplain for a dorm at the time. And that moment really kind of started to push me and kind of trying to understand kind of my faith background, why I believed what I did, why I was planning on going to the ministry. And my calling changed into one of really wanting to work with faith communities instead of ministering to a faith community, in actually kind of mobilizing and kind of equipping people of faith to kind of use their voices and their bodies to implement social change. And it actually, on a personal level, when I graduated in 2003, I had already been diagnosed with a degenerative retinal condition, so I knew I was going blind. And for anybody who has lived at Pepperdine, it's rather hard to get around not being able to drive a car in LA and Los Angeles County. I'm originally from the Central Valley of California. And two of my friends sat me down and said, "You're going blind, you can't drive, you have no job, so get in the van and drive with us to New York City." And I said, okay. And so that's how I ended up in New York. And actually, my work in New York was actually more as a generalist. So I worked with a couple different faith-based nonprofit organizations to mobilize and organize faith communities around issues of environmental racism and environmental justice, racial reconciliation, poverty, aging in the city. So I dabbled and worked in a lot of different social issues, but it was actually not until the housing crash of 2008 that housing really found me. And I actually lost my jobs in those nonprofits, and actually found myself to be housing insecure, actually myself. And I had all my stuff in storage and was experiencing homelessness in a particular kind of way, where I was actually house sitting and moving from apartment to apartment while people were on vacations through my faith community. And so housing obviously, kind of touched a particular place for me. And it was during that time that I was actually hired with Habitat for Humanity. And so my specialty in housing was actually learned on the job. It wasn't ever kind of incorporated into my education, but through lived experiences and learning about issues of segregation, racial inequality, redlining, and kind of the black-white homeownership gap, the access to equity. All of those things kind of were more learned on the job once I was actually brought into Habitat and the housing issue through more of a generalist community organizing background.
Interesting. I know here in Los Angeles, and I'm assuming in DC and in New York, it's an interesting juxtaposition right now around the increasing number of folks experiencing homelessness, as well as this strange kind of migration of folks that are working from home and expanding the size of their homes to have a home office and Can you speak a little bit about how that might be, what's happening in Westchester, and also kind of how you're approaching that contradiction as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think going through the pandemic, everybody realized, how important home was. Like for a time, everybody, the mantra was stay home, and for so many people, home, many, in New York City and the Westchester region, there are tens of thousands of people that are experiencing homelessness, and the majority of them are children. And for other people, home is not a safe place. Might be overcrowded, and in times of pandemic, we saw it became a unhealthy circumstance for many people that were living doubled and tripled up, or experiencing domestic violence and conflict within the home. So home is incredibly important, and home office is, has definitely kind of expanded the way we think about things. And so for us in New York City, we're constantly trying to identify ways that we can bring the Habitat mission and innovate it in a way that will give more people access to the equity building opportunities that home ownership brings. So we're looking at strategies around converting rental buildings to tenant-owned cooperatives. We're looking at ways for folks to age in place, to supplement their income by creating accessory dwelling units, or converting basement apartments, things of that nature that will help to supplement income and also create affordable housing in new and unique ways. And that's happening up, and that conversation is happening up in Westchester and in New York City, but also ways that we can create housing that will be affordable for generations, so that we don't end up, contributing to the, gentrification and displacement based on economic factors. So there's a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities, in this time in kind of our mission in New York City and the region.
Great, thank you, Matt. I know one of our colleagues, Rich Little, with the Kensington campus and Chapter 3 in Lancaster, California, is doing some exciting work as well about how we can both solve some of these age-old problems and think about new ways to do it. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Michael, currently within community and schools, I'm curious, what is the greatest kind of challenge impacting your organization's ability to improve the lives of students and their families, especially trying to navigate kind of this educational pathway?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think there are two that come to mind that I just can't sort of like isolate or separate. And one is probably super topical, obviously, with the pandemic. At the start of last school year, we were sort of responding to news and data out there that 3 million students were disconnected from their from formal public education during that time, and we were very sort of heightened. That was a huge alarm for us, right? And so we really focused on student engagement throughout the last school year and this school year. Some of our local affiliates, like CIS of San Antonio, really provided that kind of innovation or ideas of saying, like, well, let's get a re-engagement coordinator out there into the community, knocking on doors, bringing resources to families, and also helping them be aware of how to, plug back into schools. Where are they? What do they need? What might be some of those barriers that are disproportionately impacting them? And that's led us to start this year by putting out an investment to surge the number of re-engagement coordinators to pair with our CIS site coordinators, right? Part of that, though, is our challenge there is we worry that re-engagement, then the goalpost gets set at, well, is the student physically back in a school? And that's likely not enough, right? We can make sure that the student is back in the school, but true student engagement is going to come when that student is engaged socially, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And so we want to make sure that, again, schools are built in a way that teachers aren't the only ones wearing all of these hats. And there are others in that school who can be a team, who can bring in the community to attend to these other needs and recognize that the two work hand in hand, social, emotional development with learning. And the two work together. I think the other challenge our organization faces that, if I could share with this group is more of a real talk, right, is this organization's been around for 40 plus years. And we've, a central challenge that we continue to kind of turn at is trying to move the communities and supporters and our own staff and our own held beliefs from a charity mindset to what our chief equity officer calls a justice mindset. And that gets right back to what I started, where we talked about direct service of students and being able to empower them, to also partnering with schools and systems to remove barriers and change that, right? And not seeing, and I say partner very intentionally, right? Not seeing them as sort of some ambiguous countering force, but really what are some of those things that we can do to help, for someone with my background, change some of the forms, make some of those things less intimidating and more welcoming. Dr. Bettina Love out of the University of Georgia calls this co-conspirator work. And I think as an organization and as a network, we are very committed to that value and to the concept and to that aspiration. And we're still trying to brainstorm internally and externally about, well, what are those things that we can do and that would demonstrate co-conspirator work.
It's a lot of my work throughout the day is working with a lot of teachers in schools and at night as well in the coursework with the graduate students. But a lot of the pressures, the pressure points, I think, that are emerging, kind of working with, I won't say post-pandemic at all, but I will say kind of the reopening of schools. The teachers are feeling incredible pressure to have to make up for all the lost learning throughout the pandemic right now in the last 3 months. And the families, and I'm sure you know this, are still trying to figure out how to re-engage in ways that are authentic and, as you said, empowering. Because Mary Johnson, a good friend of mine and a partner of the program, she's the founder and director of Parent U-Turn, does very similar work to community and schools. She makes the argument that actually, while communication may have increased in the fact that a lot of parents and families and guardians were learning how to log on and check out work. And she argues that in many ways throughout the pandemic, she thinks that it was one-way communication, more of the schools and institutions kind of telling parents what they needed to do, and that we need to figure out how to reconnect in a way where it's two-way communication, where, as you said, empowering parents is so critical. Curious if you're seeing any of this or maybe some other challenges that are emerging kind of in this reopening.
Yeah, absolutely. Our CEO is out in the community prioritizing re-engagement right now, right? And again, very delicately using phrases like post-pandemic or returning to normal. And in fact, he Ray Saldana very much specifically talks about, listen, we can't go back to normal because normal wasn't working for everyone. And so, our programmatic, because I focus on our coordinators around the country and the training and support that we can provide them, right? And this year is actually focused on family engagement. It's focused on how to do it meaningfully so that the answers we get about family engagement is not, let's throw a pizza party because we know pizzas will get parents to come, and focus more on, well, what are some of the decisional aspects that we can learn from parents and learn from students in their own education, so that we can change, what our incentives are in school. Like, how are we hearing from these communities very specifically? And again, it's sort of not a approach that we have a solution to. We are sort of actively listening right now by being in the community and having folks take the time to have those conversations.
Perfect. And I would imagine all of us would agree that one of the key components is you have to actually be in the community you're advocating alongside with, right? We can't do a top-down approach, nor can we assume that we know what the needs are. So it's each one of you is shared in ways in which you are, once again, developing partnerships and fostering those relationships with the community, not from kind of a colonial or post-colonial approach, right? But actually working alongside with and beside. That's powerful. We have a couple minutes left. I had a separate question, but I actually want to transition because I liked one of the questions Jer asked Isaac earlier. If each one of you in maybe 30 to 45 seconds could share someone that inspires you, somebody that helps you to sustain in your daily work. I'll leave it at that. Whitney?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. And I think for me, I've been really inspired in my work by young activists and really incredible young leaders. We have a lot in our programs around the world that are doing advocacy at the grassroots level in different countries. I think a good example that probably folks have heard of is Malala. I've loved following her journey and sort of seeing her from Pakistan and becoming this really global face and advocate for education, for girls' education. So I'd say that's one for me, but there are many names that go unknown that are doing similar work around the world that have been inspiring to me as well.
Great, thank you. Matt?
And the person that first comes to mind is actually Clarence Jordan, who many folks may not have heard of, but was the founder of Koinonia Farm down in around Americus, Georgia, where Habitat was founded. And Koinonia is was a Christian, interracial, pacifist, kind of environmentally conscious community that was in the heart of rural Georgia and founded, pre-civil rights movement, where that kind of community was not, like, let's just say it was not welcome at that time in that place. And the work and the community that they built there became the inspiration for the founders of Habitat for Humanity, the founders of the Community Land Trust movement, to bring people together and to really see land and access to housing, as well as collective ownership and coming together for kind of the larger social change. Clarence Jordan and his work and theological work in that space really helped to inspire a lot of people, including myself and the Habitat mission. So I would want to highlight his and the work of Koinonia Farm down in Georgia.
Great, thank you, Matt. Michael?
Ooh, this one's tough. I don't know why I have such issues sometimes with these questions. So I might be giving a cop-out one, but I'd like to my answer is sort of more generically these roles of educators and site coordinators. I think I get the privilege of being able to travel before the pandemic to a lot of our communities and meet with teachers and site coordinators and sort of see the quiet work that they do every day, see the things that they are doing to really make a system a little bit more accessible. And so if I could lift up and name them all, I probably would, but my memory's terrible. I will say that, our education system relied on a already constrained and tenuous workforce of educators working in schools, trying to help students and families. And I think even as this sort of scary and frightening data comes out, as we get a grasp of that disruption, we need to first focus on the educators in the classroom and their well-being, because that will have trickle effects. That is the system around the students that we aim to help and serve.
Perfect. Thank you. And I don't think it's a cop-out at all, especially somebody who works in K-12 education and the folks that are actually helping schools and help to allow schools to keep functioning throughout the pandemic as well. I just want to thank the panel. Oftentimes as faculty, what we don't often get to share is that folks like you on the panel, our students, having conversations like this is exactly what helps to sustain us as well, right? We obviously have some expertise. We've been doing work for many years as well, but every time we have an opportunity to meet like this, it's reinvigorating for us as well. So Whitney Groves, Matt Dunbar, Michael Huang, thank you. And I will turn it back over to Bree.
Thank you, Dr. Coladas, and well said. I agree. That was so invigorating and energizing. It makes me want to get out there and do something today. Maybe it will be through Habitat, which kind of transitions into our next opportunity. But before I transition, again, a huge virtual applause for our panel. You took your time to share your stories with us, and we feel honored. That was incredible. I feel inspired and ready to move forward. support. So thank you for being a friend to Pepperdine. We really appreciate you. So going into our next piece, we do have several alums and one current student at Pepperdine University. And the reason why I threw in that habitat connection is because one of our guests, Michael, he can probably wave if he's on camera now, but he actually has done lots of work with Habitat, lots of volunteering throughout his years, and he's going to be sharing his story about his work with Habitat. And actually our Net Impact chapter here at Pepperdine, which is collaboration between our social entrepreneurship and change program and the MBAs at Pepperdine. So Michael is an MBA, first year MBA, and I'm a second year SEC student, and we're both a part of the leadership at Net Impact Pepperdine. And so the first breakout room that we will introduce to you is Michael's and mine, and we are going to be talking about net impact and how to make a difference in some volunteer experiences. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see where to choose a breakout room, and you can choose based on these three. So the first one, like I said, is net impact. The second one I'd like to introduce to all of you, Chris. Chris is an SEC alum, and his social issue is equity and equality. And Chris has been a great friend to the SEC program. He's constantly coming back and serving the community. And so we're so thankful for Chris's work with the SEC program. And you can choose room number 2 if you'd like to learn more about that social issue. And then room number 3 is going to be Casey. We can have Casey hop on. Hi, Casey. Good morning.
Good morning.
Casey is also an alum of the SEC program, and her social issue is environmental sustainability. So access to food equality and sustainability and food chain and all of that great stuff. And so if you're interested in learning more about that social issue, or if you care deeply about it, then you're going to choose room 3 when you choose your breakout session. So in these breakout sessions, we're just going to spend 10 minutes learning from each other. We're going to have opportunities to collaborate and bring up strategies and ideas just to help each other out. And then what I would like for you to do is come back and join us in the main room again in 10 minutes, because our next speaker and the last speaker of the day is going to be Charity Wallace. And I am very excited for all of you to listen to her story. She has a great organization, and she also worked for Laura Bush, and she was her chief of staff as well as the Bush Foundation. So please come back into the main room in 10 minutes and text your friends and send them the direct link, and we'll get everybody in here so that they can feel inspired as well. And we are going to move on to our final segment of the day. Thank you all for all the presenters today and for joining us. Really excited to introduce our next presenters. So first I'm pulling up my bios, transitioning out of the breakout rooms here. But I'd like to first introduce our host, Dr. Christine McGinn. Dr. Christine McGinn is a psychologist and organizational consultant. Her work in private practice included outpatient and inpatient services in the mid-90s. She served as chief of psychology at Los Encinas Hospital in Pasadena, California, happens to be my hometown. She served on nonprofit boards, including Hidden Harvest and the LA Free Clinic. Because of her interest in working with organizations, Dr. McGinn returned to graduate school and earned her MBA at USC. Today, her focus is on social entrepreneurship and helping small businesses succeed. And Dr. McGinn feels privileged to serve on the Pepperdine's advisory board for social entrepreneurship and change. Thank you so much for hosting this incredible session. We're really looking forward to hearing the conversation, and I'd like to introduce our guest.
Happy to be here, Bree, and looking forward to our conversation with Charity as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So Charity Wallace, and Charity, thank you. I know you're a busy woman and you're joining us on a Saturday. I'm sure you have lots to do today, but I want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining. Charity is the founder and president of Wallace Global Impact It's a strategic, mission-driven, and pioneer executive leader with expertise in social impact, foreign policy, global development, and women's empowerment. She most recently served as SVP and Managing Director at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, overseeing the team working to cultivate private sector investment in projects across strategic regions and sectors including healthcare, technology, and energy, promoting foreign policy and national security. Wallace was the founding vice president of the Global Women's Institute at Beauche Institute, and she served as senior advisor and chief of staff to Laura Bush. Wallace served in Bush administration for all 8 years, most notably as Director of Advance for the First Lady and Deputy Chief of Protocol of the United States. Wallace earned her master's degree in international relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. She serves on the advisory boards of All Together, Forward, Acola Academy, the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine University, and is a senior advisor to Concordia and Strong Women, Strong World. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She just has a few incredible things going on in her life, just a few. And so we're so thankful that you're sharing your insights with us today, Charity, and I will let you two take it away.
Thanks. Great. Thanks, Bree. Well, Charity and I've had a chance to talk over the last couple of days, and I'm so inspired by your background and your work, and really looking forward to our conversation. But I wanted to start by talking about your work at the George W. Bush Institute, where you advocated for so many different issues, including global women's initiatives, First Ladies Initiative, Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon, and the Afghan Women's Project. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to focus on women's issues, if you would.
Sure. Well, thank you all. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, good. So good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here. And thank you, Dr. McGinn, for hosting this conversation. And Bree, thanks for the invitation to join this morning. It was very interesting. I worked in the Bush administration for all 8 years. And so when the administration ended, Mrs. Bush asked me to come down and be her chief of staff and transition her. And during that time, we really thought about what they would spend their time on for the rest of their lives. And women's issues were something that Mrs. Bush championed as the First Lady. And because I had the opportunity to travel to more than 75 countries with her and really see on the ground when women are empowered, when women are able to access education and economic opportunity and healthcare, communities transform, families are stronger and more safe. Their children are more educated. So we wanted to focus on how do we empower women through the work of the Bush Institute. And when I started as the director and then vice president of the Global Women's Initiatives at the Bush Institute, President Bush actually sat me down and said, and this is in 2010, so right before the Arab Spring, President Bush actually sat me down and said, look, Laura and I believe that women will lead the freedom and democracy movement in the Middle East. So get on that. And that's sort of all that he told me to do. And so we created, and it took about 6 or 8 months for me to really think through how do you develop women leaders from the Middle East in a culture that's very challenging for women to have authority and leadership. And so I looked around at a number of different, organizations and initiatives and projects that had been created and created the very first leadership development program at the Bush Institute, which has now been replicated. They have 5 of them, but we started with women from the Middle East and North Africa, thinking that women are the ability to help create really strong civil society so that institutions, the organizations that come alongside a government or private sector to build stability within a country. And so that's what we created there. And then Mrs. Bush had been an advocate for Afghan women since 2001. So, we just passed the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And I was actually at the White House working that day and had to evacuate. And it was very scary. I mean, a lot of people probably on this call may not remember that day, but it was a day that changed the history of the world, frankly, definitely America. And when we looked at who the terrorists, where they had been harbored, it was Afghanistan. And so all of our eyes turned towards Afghanistan, and we saw the brutality of the Taliban against women and girls. The girls were never allowed to go to school. Women couldn't leave their homes without a male escort. Women didn't have access to healthcare. So maternal mortality was very high, illiteracy is very high, and economic opportunity was there was none for women. And when Mrs. Bush did the very first, she did the presidential radio address in November of 2001, she talked about Afghan women. And so from that time, we've been working with Afghan women organizations for the last 20 years. And actually, I'm still working to get some of the Afghan women out of Afghanistan who are trying to flee the Taliban now. So that's the reason we focused on that. And then first ladies, of course, use their platform very effectively to make social change for women and girls. They can advocate specifically for women and girls in a way that others may not have the strongest platform to do. And then Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon was actually a global health program that we started to address cervical and breast cancer in sub-Saharan Africa primarily, and in the developing world, because those are the leading causes of cancer deaths, and they're preventable and treatable. So we utilize the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief that President Bush started and is still going on today to address the AIDS epidemic, which only 50,000 people had access to the antiretroviral drugs that were needed to combat AIDS. And so millions of people were dying. And President Bush created the very first very large public-private partnership. So it was the US federal government working with NGOs and private sector, so the pharmaceutical companies and other healthcare companies, to deliver the much needed healthcare opportunities for people who are, I met people in Africa who literally, they call it the Lazarus effect. So they were almost dying because of AIDS. And there were organizations like World Vision and others who took these life-saving drugs out to communities on bicycles to get it out to these communities. And they came back to life. And so they call it the Lazarus effect. And actually, I met a woman who had been dying on her porch. And she got those ARVs from a local NGO that was working with the PEPFAR program. And then she became one of the distributors of the ARV drugs to others in her community. So those are the reasons why we worked on that. But as I started to say at the beginning, it's because of the transformation that it makes. When we invest in women, we change families, communities, and countries. And so I think it was those firsthand experiences, but also now all of the data proves the importance of investing in women and girls.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the funding, both for public and private and opportunities. And also, it sounds like there was also a lot of government funding on the US side.
Absolutely.
To get some of the projects up and going.
Yeah, I think, Isaac started talking a little bit about this at the very beginning. It's very important to be able to utilize public sector, private sector. And then the unique part about the United States, when we think about social issues and issues that are important, Americans are very generous, and we give to programs and projects that are important to us. And it's unlike any other country in the world, honestly. Americans' generosity, the feeling about hospitality and being a good neighbor, I think is very important. So we utilize at the Bush Institute, and then other programs that I've worked on have utilized the private sector investment, which is critical. I think the private sector plays a very significant role in all of the issues that we're trying to face today, the most challenging and pressing issues of our time. And, if you think about the sustainable development goals that the UN created, there are 17 of them. And the private sector plays a very significant role in the investments, but also, as Isaac mentioned, they're nimble and flexible. They have a different kind of entrepreneurial spirit in the way in which they face and look at challenges and address challenges. But governments are also very important. To invest in various social needs. So the US government is very generous, although I will say, because there's a misconception, that the federal aid or the international global aid that we provide is less than 1% of our budget. And we are making a difference in all over the world from the work that we're doing through the US government's investments. And then, of course, NGOs play a very significant role. They can raise money, but they're also on the ground, which is really important. I think that local touch is critical to facing and addressing challenges. Does that answer some of your question? One of the things I didn't talk about was last year I worked at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which is a very unique U.S. government agency, but it only invests in commercially viable transactions and investments. So we worked in emerging markets. We worked like a bank. So we invested in really incredible programs and actual like investments, projects, commercially viable businesses that were helping to create stability economic opportunity for people all over the world. And one of the things that I focused on was to ensure that at least 50% of our investments focused on gender smart investments. So those that help support women-led, women-founded, women supporting. So meaning that there were women they were employees of the businesses or products and services that disproportionately helped women. And it was very important during COVID in particular, because women were disproportionately impacted last year, as we know.
Well, and it seems like it's really important, especially for the social entrepreneurs, to have access to various types of funding.
That's right.
Rather than having to go out and find it on their own. I mean, to link up with some of these agencies and some of the opportunities there.
Absolutely.
That are already in place and have some structure and strategy and a lot of thought behind what they're doing and who they fund. Tell us a little bit about why you started your own group, the Wallace
Global. I really thought about the experience that I had, which I've been so blessed, honestly. When we talked about my journey was from a volunteer that walked in off the street, wanting to work for Dr. Condoleezza Rice. And I believed in Governor Bush and his compassionate conservatism and the other programs that he was working on, and, ended up working for the Bushes for 16 years. But throughout those experiences, because of the travel that I had, because I was able to work with nonprofits along the way, and then worked in for-profit companies, and then utilized that, the government, I worked in the federal government, obviously, for many years. So I really wanted to utilize my passion, which is to improve people's lives all over the world and help people have a greater impact through their work. So I work with large nonprofits, so large NGOs that are primarily focused on global reach, as well as corporations, family foundations, and then some others, individuals even, that really to help them think through how do they improve their impact. And a lot of that is by designing really creative partnerships. So maybe things that are a little bit outside the box, but how do you utilize the federal government? How do you utilize even local government programs that can stimulate or come alongside, leverage those with private sector or nonprofit work to have a greater impact? So that's the reason I wanted to do it. I feel very passionately about, one of the things I think about is helping people, and primarily women, reach their God-given potential and help them make a change in their own lives and communities. So that's what drives me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Can you speak a little bit about social entrepreneurship and change? I know in the master's program, it's about building or being part of a sustainable organization. And I think it can be done in a couple of different ways. It can be ground up, or it can be working within an existing organization.
That's right.
Could you talk a little bit about opportunities or how you see people being able to fit into existing corporations that really, I think, are becoming more and more mindful about a lot of the social justice issues that we're talking about today?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. We have seen a shift in the last several years towards what we've all talked about today, DE&I, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, about thinking about corporate social responsibility was sort of the first wave of what we're working on now. ESG is another thing that a lot of companies are working on. So that means environmental, social, and governance. And those are the policies and programs, initiatives, and projects that companies can put into place within their company, but also as whatever product or service they provide, it's a focus on those things. And I think social entrepreneurs are very critical. Where I would start from a social entrepreneur is, what do you know the most about? What are you the most interested in? Thinking back on what really makes you excited, I think, is where people should start, or seeing a need. And I think it's interesting, you think about some of the most successful companies are those that this is a funny example, but like Spanx. So she thought of a need that she had, and she created this $1 billion company for women. And it's something that, she needed. But when we think about social entrepreneurship and social change, as we look around, what are the issues that are most critical in your community or in the nation or in the world that you feel the most strongly about? And then building, I think, to your point, it's important, especially as people are launching. A lot of times I've learned so much from the experiences that I've had in various backgrounds or institutions. So whether that be the federal government, a for-profit company, and then bringing my passion, my expertise, my network, all the things that I've learned into that to create initiatives, to strengthen initiatives or projects within a company. I think that's a way in which we can have a significant difference. So we're not all just launching our own programs, which is also our businesses, which is also very important. But I do think that there is something to be said about joining a company and bringing your passion, your vision, your mission, your thoughts, again, your experience, and then also learning so much from others about what are the most effective ways to pull the levers. I think data now helps us identify what those levers are, how we can pull them effectively. And I'll just say, I feel very blessed. One of my clients right now is World Vision. I am so impressed by the holistic approach that they provide for all of the issues. So they really look at a person from their birth all the way into their late years, and how do they address each of those needs, whether that be starting with maternal health and maternal mortality. And then, so my point is, these holistic approaches are actually very critical, because oftentimes we do silo ourselves in addressing issues. And I think if we step back and look from a very holistic perspective, it will actually be helpful. And that is one of the things that I do as far as partnerships. So sometimes I put kind of unique partners together that may not all be working on the exact same thing, but some of the either the skill set or the projects that they're working on can bolster another type of initiative. So one of them you and I talked about was something called the MOMS program at the Development Finance Corporation. And that stands for Maternal Outcomes Matters. And we had the Development Finance Corporation, which we were investing money into different businesses that were helping. So that could be healthcare companies, it could be hospitals, it could be kind of unique, even taxis that were taking women to the clinics. Those are the types of investments we were making. USAID was a partner, and they're doing more of the grant making, huge projects that they invest in around the world. And then we worked with Credit Suisse, which was our private equity bank that actually invested alongside of us. And, they're not a maternal health company, they're a bank. And so really thinking about how do we get them excited about what we were working on? And they were very excited about making a difference in this space globally. And then we worked with Merck for Mothers, and their whole expertise is about how do you help save women's lives in childbirth? How do you ensure that children are born healthy and safe? So those are the kinds of ways. And my whole point of bringing that up is really thinking about how do you bring your own expertise, but also think creatively and outside the box of what your company or what you can be doing as a social entrepreneur to engage with other partners to make a greater impact.
Yes, it seems like that creative thinking is so important. And thinking out of the box, like you mentioned, because to link all of those things up together can have a huge impact, but you can't limit yourself in terms of what you think or what you hope to connect and move forward in that way.
That's right.
What would be your biggest one or two ideas to share with other social entrepreneurs? I mean, in terms of what they can do to move some of their ideas forward.
That's kind of a hard question. But I'd love to, I think about leadership, first of all, and what does good leadership look like? Isaac referenced this earlier this morning. It's about being a visionary. The people that I know who have had the most significant change, I'll give you an example. Nancy Brinker, who I worked for, she was the chief of protocol when I was the deputy chief of protocol. She started Susan G. Komen for the Cure in the 1980s, and her sister was Susan G. Komen. And what it does is address breast cancer. And at the time that she started it, you were actually in newspapers not allowed to print the word breast. So it was hard to talk about breast cancer when you couldn't even actually address it in written word from newspapers. And, so my point is she had an uphill battle, but she sort of doesn't take no for an answer. So she thinks very creatively. She is very passionate about what she's doing. So I'm only giving her as an example because it's somebody I learned from. Like I said, she's a visionary. She knows her mission. She doesn't take no for an answer, and she goes out and gets different partners to come alongside of her. She's created one of the world's largest nonprofits that is addressing a single issue in the entire world, and it's changed women's lives. She's worked with the healthcare industry. She's worked with the bra industry. She's worked with, she's worked in all these different industries to gain awareness and influence. So my whole point of saying that is, I think as a social entrepreneur, really think about what is your mission? What is your vision? It can get really challenging sometimes because there's probably lots of no's. And I would say just get along with a partner to help encourage you to keep honing your thought, honing your idea. And then approaching different people. A lot of the approach has to do with what are the innovations that you can provide that are different, or what are the ways in which you can address this issue and bring others along. And sometimes that helps with raising funding, frankly, and funding is hard to get, honestly. So if you can get with like the Small Business Association may have some opportunities for that. VCs obviously do, they're very hard to get money from. But I would say, there's really neat organizations. There's one actually that I've worked with as a mentor called it's Unreasonable is what it's called. And they work specifically with social entrepreneurs that are addressing major issues that we face as a globe, as a world. And, they're ones I would say, look at the ways in which they're approaching their issues. They're all for-profit companies. And Unreasonable has a group of investors that come alongside these social entrepreneurs, both as mentors. So I think mentorship is actually very critical when you're starting something. And then also they have investors and funders. So that's a really good model to look at and see who might be part of that you could replicate or come alongside with. I think those are some of the biggest issues. I think the mentoring piece. I also think being able to pivot is really important. And it's hard. I mean, people, once you have an idea, you honestly think, I don't want to have to pivot, but that's actually creates resilience and it creates sustainability. And so I would say, don't be afraid to pivot.
No, I think that's a good point. And I think that's part of being able to thrive and go on and not feel defeated in that way. Well, I want to thank you, Charity. It's been great. I've loved having the opportunity to get to talk to you a bit and to find out more. And I have to say, with you and all the participants today, even though I've worked in this field in one way or another on boards or serving or working with people, it's just touched me in a much deeper way. So
thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Pepperdine for hosting this. This is I'm a Pepperdine grad, so I'm very proud to be here today.
Yes. Good. And we're so delighted to have you. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kernan.
Thank you. I'm not Dr. Kernan, but I will step
great.
in.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Charity and Dr. McGinn, that was amazing. Like, truly, I know amazing is an overused word, but I really mean it. Huge thank you, big virtual applause. There were so many things in there, Charity, that I was writing down. I felt like I was in a master's seminar. So many practical nuggets in there that I couldn't write fast enough. So a couple of my takeaways: I love your emphasis on partnerships. I was at a conference recently where a woman who was advocating for justice was having a hard time getting some legislation. It was basically around the issue of life in prison for people sentenced when they're youth. And she was having a hard time getting the legislation changed, and she got local businesses involved. And by getting businesses involved in the advocating, the laws changed. So I think those partnerships are so huge. So thank you for that nugget. I loved your story and your journey of just starting off as a volunteer, and look where you are now. So I think that life of service and authenticity and being available and using your gifts and talents is such a huge testimony to who you are and to how we can really see change in the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to be taking back all the other nuggets to my fellow cohort and this recording. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to be moving on to our next and last portion, where it will be Dr. Kernan, and you get to hear from him and his experiences about the program. First, I do want to remind you, this is the final call to receive that $2,500 scholarship. So for the last time, we're going to be putting the form in the chat, and we'll be drawing names right after this brief presentation on the MA in social entrepreneurship and change. And I just want to say one more time, a huge thank you to all of our speakers and guests. We are so honored that you would spend your Saturday with us and share your experiences. Dr. Kernan?
First, I want to be Bree today because Bree has been amazing. As you can tell, she's an amazing person. So thank you, Bree, for all you've done pulling this together. And again, reiterated, all the speakers, all the guests have been amazing. And I've learned so much today, and I'm looking forward to keeping this dialogue going. And with that note, I'm going to keep this very brief as well, because you've heard, I'm just going to give you a top line look at our program. And what you heard today is what we're all about. And if you can go to the next slide. You know, basically, we have two campuses, and you can back up one. Our main campus is in LA, and this is the beautiful Malibu campus that overlooks the Pacific. And our main building is in West LA, and that's where we really do support a lot of our international students. So if you're out there, and we highly encourage you, take a look at us, come to our West LA campus. We have a lot of supportive students for supportive services for our outside the United States international students. But as Bree mentioned, next slide, we are coming to DC in 2022, amazing 2022. And we're going to be located right on Pennsylvania Ave, only a few blocks from the White House, right in the center there. And we have a building there, and we're going to put this program right there. So that you know, we have 15 cohorts that are gone through or currently in our West LA campus, and the DC will be our first one there. So we're looking forward to being there in 2022. Next slide. Now, you've heard this today. I mean, everything you heard from each of the speakers is what social entrepreneurship and change is all about. And we throw in the change because we have to do something about it. But you heard, you know, what it basically comes down to is we're going to draw upon business techniques and private sector approaches to find solutions to social, cultural, and environmental problems. That's what we do. And you heard from the speakers today about how you have to involve academia, you have to involve nonprofits, you have to involve the for-profit, the nonprofit, the foundations. It really is a community, and we just show you how to use proven business techniques to solve these problems. So next, please. And as you heard, what we're going to do is we want to create these lasting market-based solutions. So what does that mean? It really means change the way businesses operate. If you're for-profit, no longer for-profit because you make all this money. You make a lot of money, but you also pay attention to your stakeholders in the community you're in. If you're a nonprofit, a foundation, no longer you're a great foundation because you have this good mission. you have this good mission and passion, and you have a sustainable business model. That's what we're all about, and that's what our program will teach you how to do. Next slide. And hopefully you got a sense of this with Jared Beauche this morning, Dr. Colados, people that you heard from. Our faculty want to be there. They have the degrees to teach you how to do it, but more importantly, they've been successful recently in the real world. So they will be teaching you things that actually work. And most importantly, we want to be in a classroom. So hopefully you get a sense of that from myself. You get a sense of that from Dr. Colados, a sense of that from Jer, that we hit these three. And most importantly, we want to be in the classroom. We're not doing this to make a fortune. That's not our goal. Our goal is to change the world through our students because we want to be there. Next slide. And this just gives you a sense of the diversity. And hopefully you've seen that in our presenters today, that we've got a great diversity of people that will help you get through this program, help you understand what you're trying to do, and to build that passion. Next slide. How do we make this work? You heard Bree keep mentioning this. We're a blended model. That means that you don't have to move if you don't want to. Some students do move to either LA or maybe in the future DC, but you don't have to. Our program is designed so that you can do this program wherever you are in this world. We will meet for the equivalent of about 60% of the time in person on our campuses, and we'll meet every week synchronously, meaning this at the same time like we're doing now online. This is not an asynchronous program. You're going to get to know your professors, your fellow students incredibly well, because these are the people that are going to help you during and after the program. And we are high touch. We want to make sure that we get you through. So our blended model allows you to participate in this program. And we have students from China, from Africa, from all over South Central, Latin America, Canada, and across the United States that form these cohorts of 15 to 20 people that will travel with you continuously for your time there. Next slide. Really fast. It goes over 5 terms. It goes very quickly. 5 continuous terms, 20 months. It passes very quickly. And the first 3 terms is all about you learning about yourself. You heard about from the speakers how important that is. Learning the framework from which you lead from, which is very important for you to do. Diving deep into your social issue, because it's good to have that passion, but you got to understand the root causes in order to change it and to impact it. And also you learning what an organization is all about, that vision. It all starts with a vision, mission, and strategy. So that's your first 3 terms. Your last 2 terms is all about being applicable, walking away with something tangible. And what you're going to do is you're going to do a global experience where you're going to go to a developing country. And I'll talk about that in a second. But your second year is all about you building a social enterprise, applying it to what you're going to do so that whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, and I'll define that later, you have something to walk away with. Next slide. One of the hallmarks that we do is a global experience. We will send you to and this happens in your 3rd term, after you learn all those things about yourself, we're going to send you to a country that's going to make you a little uncomfortable. If you're from a developing country, trust me, we'll find some place to send you. We don't send you there as an expert. We send you there, 1, to understand that most issues have a global component. 2, to understand, as you heard, is that if you choose to work in a certain place, you're going to need to be there. 3, to understand how somebody working in your area of interest actually gets the work done. So this is an incredible experience. It's a minimum of 2 weeks. Some of our students, depending on their schedules, will stay a lot longer, but this is going to get you to really understand how this work is being done globally and how people are making a change. Next slide. And the last thing is what we actually get you to do in your last 2 terms is you're going to build a social enterprise. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. Why do I want to do this? Because you have to understand how to build one, whether you want to be inside of a company or a foundation. So you're going to start from understanding the feasibility behind your passion, that problem that you just heard from, Chrissy just talked about, that is that problem, that passion that you have feasible to develop? You're going to do the market research. You're going to learn how to do a marketing plan, an operation plan, an impact plan. You're going to develop an investment schedule. You will write a business plan, and you end your SEC career in what we call an SEC fast pitch competition. Next slide. And what that is if you've ever seen Shark Tank, this is what we call a Shark Tank for social good. that you will pitch your idea to a group of external investors, and we will wind up picking people that go into a finals, and then those finalists will actually win cash prizes that they can utilize to start their organizations. And basically, whether you, if you don't become a finalist, everybody benefits, because usually one of those investors, one of those panelists will hear something and connect you to somebody that you need to know whether you want to be a entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. But it's a great way to do it. We call it, think of it as a Shark Tank for social good, where you pitch these ideas. Next slide. Just where they are now. Next slide, please. As you heard, about 20% go on to earn their doctorates because they want to come back and probably teach in academia on the topics that they're interested in. 40% take their ideas and go back within for-profit and nonprofit organizations. So intrapreneurs, as you heard, are very important. That's growing with the DE, DEI, and B. I throw in the belonging as well. So about 40% of our students become intrapreneurs. So they take what they've built, their specialty, and they go back within these corporations. About 15% become consultants and foundations, and about 25% launch what they actually developed during the program. So this program is designed for you to do a lot. Okay, next slide. And this is just to learn more. Please, you can just contact our admissions group or go to our website on SEC, and I'll give you links and show you how you can connect. And or otherwise, send Bree Jensen at pepperdine.edu a message, and she'll gladly connect you with our wonderful enrollment team that will help you get up to speed. But actually, that was all I wanted to. You could stop sharing now. Wanted to share with you today just the overview of the program, and we're highly accessible. And like you heard from all the speakers, the point of today was really understanding why we believe in this thing we call social entrepreneurship, social innovation. And these speakers that you heard today are doing it, and they're a marvelous example. And again, I come back to saying thank you all for participating, and this was highly educational. So on that note, I'm turning it back over to Bree. And Bree, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kernan. Very informative. I agree. I think that this program has been extremely transformational. You start off with leadership and talk through who you are as a leader first and laying the foundation so you can build upon that. So it's been an incredible experience, and I'd be happy to share my experience with you. If you'd like to reach out, I'll put my email in the chat and we can schedule a time to have a phone call. No pressure. We can just talk and see how I would love to hear your story of what you're doing to create change in the world. So now's the time that we are going to draw names. So I'm going to give it over to my team, which, by the way, thank you so much to the entire team, Linda, Lucy, Jennifer, and I think I'm missing someone, so shout out Jake. Thank you, Jake. Thank you to the entire team that has really helped put this on. I really couldn't have done it without you, and you all know that. So I'm very, very grateful for all of you. If you can draw the name, I'm so excited to see who's going to be getting that $2,500 scholarship and joining us in the SEC program. Go for it. Yeah, Abraham. Awesome. I think I saw you in the chat communicating. I believe you're from Africa. We're so happy that you got this scholarship. Congratulations. Big virtual applause. That's so exciting. Hi, you want to say hello?
I can't believe this.
Yay. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you hoping? Yeah, go ahead.
I just saw the link on LinkedIn. Usually I'm on the internet looking for a means of opportunity and growing my community-based waste management approach. And then I decided to register. So I can't believe this is true. Like I'm dreaming.
That's amazing. Congratulations. So we will connect with you offline and make sure we get you this scholarship and go through all the details of eligibility. Dr. Kernan, do you want to say something?
Abraham, I loved your comments that you've been making, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and telling you more about the program. Congratulations, and looking forward to hearing more about you.
Thank you so much. I'm out of words.
That's awesome. But Abraham, please make sure that you direct message myself your email address, a number we can reach you on, your information, so we can make sure that we connect with you and move forward with this. So thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. I'm
Yes. Yes. So what a great way to end the day. That's so exciting. I'm so happy. So he just stumbled upon the link, and you just never know what life will bring you in a day on a Saturday here. So, and it's just nice to see how we are a global program. Currently, actually, Abraham, in my cohort, we have someone living in Africa doing the program. So it's absolutely doable. And so we're really excited that this could be an opportunity for you. So congratulations. That being said, I would like to thank everyone again for joining. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my information in the chat. Thank you again to the team and the SEC team. I know that there's members that make this program work on with us right now. So thank you to all of you. And I'm going to say my goodbyes. This was such an incredible opportunity, even for me. I learned so much. I'm going to watch the recording many times, and that's truth, and take lots of notes. So thank you again to everyone. And I'll give it over to Dr. Kernan to say his last words, and then we will sign off and go on with our day.
Bree, you should have the last words. This is all you that you did. So thank you. So please have the last words and bring us home.
Okay. Well, then, thank you, everyone. Have a great Halloween. If you're celebrating Halloween, enjoy your families. And we're just thankful for all of you. Talk to you soon.